Hey all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a closer look at the Amazon Fire Max 11. Now, it's kind of an interesting moment to be in for Android tablets because for many years, it seems like development has dwindled and the popularity of tablets has kind of fallen off a bit. Aside from iPads, which are extremely well optimized for a large screen form factor, there wasn't really a large moment or much development at all in the Android tablet space, but over the past couple of months, that has shifted a bit. Aside from this Max 11, Google also released their Pixel tablet, so finally we're seeing a little bit more competition yet again on a larger screen mobile operating system. So from Amazon's front, the Max 11 is their most ambitious Fire tablet yet. And I know what you guys are thinking, oh no, another Fire tablet. Those are kind of notorious for being very budget-oriented tablets. Not bad if you're in the Amazon ecosystem, but far from being the most premium experience, and Fire OS, which is Amazon's fork of Android, tends to be a little heavy-handed. But the Max 11 tries to change many of those stereotypes when it comes to hardware and build. At least it's much more premium feeling. The entire tablet is constructed out of a single chunk of unibody aluminum alloy, very cold to the touch, and actually quite reminiscent of a hardware that you'll find from a more expensive tablet like an iPad or Galaxy Tab, for instance, compared to the cheaper plastics of many of the other lower-end Fire 7s and 8s. In fact, here is the aforementioned Fire 7, just to serve as a reference. It's going to be more compact, though, similar to a novel compared to, as the name implies, this being a 11-inch touchscreen. However, the resolution here is also much higher, at nearly 2K res. Perhaps a more apt comparison, though, would be the Kindle Scribe, which is, of course, the most premium e-reader that Amazon sells at the moment, having an e-ink display, and you're able to use it for supernatural note-taking purposes, but it is a black and white screen as opposed to a, again, color IPS LCD panel on the Fire Max 11. The size and dimensions, though, are comparable. That's because the Kindle Scribe has a 10.2-inch display with a more boxy, almost 4:3 aspect ratio compared to more of the widescreen 16:9 form factor of the Max 11, so technically on the diagonal it's a little bit larger again at 11 inches, although both of these devices are constructed again out of aluminum unibody, so they feel quite similar from a build perspective. And that is, in a way, impressive, because the Max 11 is the more affordable device, especially when it goes on sale, such as right now, it's selling for $180, but keep in mind that similar to the Google Store, if you're in certain eligible markets like the US and Canada, Amazon often has very aggressive trade-in offers where you can save up to 20% if you trade in an older generation Kindle device that can even be a Fire TV stick in many instances, resulting in the lowest price being around $150 when you are shopping around, again, if you have that trade-in offer applied. So it makes it a lot more affordable. That being said, do keep in mind that you have to pay some extras for, again, functions like the keyboard case that isn't included in that base price. And similar to other Fire tablets, one of the ways that Amazon is able to just generate a little bit more revenue is by displaying lock screen ads before you kind of swipe up and access the homepage. But you can pay a one-time price of $15 extra to get rid of all the ads and get a more vanilla experience. But it's honestly not super intrusive, so in most cases, again, saving a few bucks might be worth it unless you are, again, wanting the most clean version of the software possible, then just factor that into consideration. The base model of the Fire Max 11 comes with 64 gigs of storage versus a 128GB version that also retails for a little bit more, but thankfully this is expandable via a micro SD card slot, so even if you pick up the base version, you can still augment that using additional memory expansion, not too problematic, and all configurations comes with 4GB of RAM, and it's powered by the MediaTek 8188J, which has similar levels of performance as the MediaTek Helio G99, another pretty popular choice in budget phones and tablets at this $200 price range. However, the G99 is a 6nm chip compared to 12 nanometers being the transistor size on this particular processor, so it's a little bit less energy efficient. That being said, there's a fairly large capacity cell inside the Fire Max 11, and it's still rated for around 14 hours of web browsing usage, which is actually quite good for an Android tablet of its class. Again, with a 2K resolution screen, it is very sharp and gets reasonably bright as well. Some other extras that are included on this model include a fingerprint scanner on the top for added biometrics, quick to unlock into the machine. It's the only Fire Amazon device at the moment to have an integrated fingerprint scanner. This one supports USI 2.0 protocol, standing for Universal Stylus Initiative, which can be found readily on Amazon from a lot of third-party vendors, and still has support for over 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity. So for general note-taking, it should still be all right. And again, if you are just using it with your own kickstand or case, it can just act as another larger version of something like an Echo Show, for example, similar to the Google Pixel tablet, which, speaking of, we are looking at right now here. So they are both 11-inch tablets. They both weigh in roughly at 1 pound, and the Fire Max 11 is also around 7.5 millimeters in terms of thickness. Here's one more comparison with a Samsung Galaxy Tab S6/S6 Lite that is, by contrast, a little bit more compact at 10.5 inches, but you get the idea. This is definitely not bad, especially when it comes to bezel size. The Fire Max 11 is actually a little bit slimmer versus the Pixel Tab. A closer look at the hardware. On the right-hand edge is where you'll find the USB Type-C port for charging that supports up to 15 watts. But what's a little frustrating is Amazon includes in the box a AC adapter, which is only 9 watts, so it's much lower than the, again, rated 15 watts, and it takes around 4.2 hours to fully recharge this tablet from 0 to 100. If you have a slightly faster charger at home, such as a GAN power charger, you're able to top it up in around 3.5 hours. Which is more reasonable, but definitely slower compared to most modern smartphones, and that's an area where the Samsung Galaxy Tab definitely has a big advantage, is their faster wattage charging capability. So just keep that in mind. It's actually pretty close, I would say, to the Pixel tablet, which also takes around 3 hours to fully recharge. Here, you'll find multiple speakers for recognizing your voice in the Alexa command mode, and also the micro SD card slot. Although, just like the Pixel tablet, there is no LTE or cellular data version of this tablet available at the moment. You'll find volume rockers, as well as the fingerprint scanner / power key that is thankfully super fast and responsive. Up top, you'll find the stereo speakers, which are pretty immersive sounding for a tablet in the $200 price range and give you good stereo separation as you're consuming media. That being said, the Pixel tablet again does have quad speakers and also some Lenovo tablets as well, which can perhaps get just a touch louder, but I honestly think this is good enough, especially considering that it's essentially half the price of the Pixel tablet. We have the magnetic Pogo contacts for the optional keyboard case, and then on the very back, we also have an 8-megapixel autofocus camera, although there is no LED flash, along with a similar HD webcam here on the front, positioned in the landscape view, pretty good for doing video calls and conferences. The UI here is very similar to other Fire tablets, so if you used Fire OS devices, you'll be pretty much right at home here. It's just you have a much larger canvas to work with, and also Amazon have done some optimization to make it more easily compatible with USI 2.0 stylus pens, such as this Penoval one that we have for demonstration purposes. Although other manufacturers, including Amazon themselves, also sell a version that you can pick up for just around 20 to 30 bucks, not too bad at all if you want that handwriting and doodling capability. We are able to use the stylus pen basically on any text input region to begin writing, so we can say something like hello world, as you can tell, and it'll be able to transcribe that into text instead if you prefer this, or of course you can use your voice or the keyboard. You can also more easily multitask on the Fire Max 11 because of the much larger display, so you can tap on a application here in the multitasking tray and then click on split screen. And now I have the ability to run 2 applications side by side, such as watching back a video while taking notes, so on and so forth. And the 4 gigabytes of RAM, although of course it's not going to be the highest amount in the world, again, the price here being half of that essentially of a Pixel tablet also makes sense because it's also half the RAM that you're getting from that model. But in most cases, if you're running just 2 or 3 applications at once, you shouldn't have too much issues, especially since Fire OS is designed to run mostly on even less powerful hardware, such as the other more budget-conscious Fire tablets that in the day only came with, say, quad-core processors and something like only 1 gigabyte of RAM. And as a result, you can tell that some of the transition effects have been reduced on Amazon's part to make the device feel a little bit more snappy, but overall, on hardware that is the most powerful in the Fire tablet lineup, the result is you still get some acceptable level of performance here that feels speedy enough. Yes, it doesn't have a ultra-fast refresh rate like 90 or 120 Hz, but again, with the software optimization, and again, a very sharp display at 2K res, I think it still is a good enough experience that you won't be missing it too much. What hasn't really changed compared to past Fire tablets, though, is again Amazon's insistence on using these virtual hotkeys at the bottom for navigation, even though here in 2024, gesture nav is pretty much the standard across all phones and tablets by default, but you aren't able to use gesture navigation at all, even if you dig into the settings. It's locked to this mode, again, just to reduce the number of animations that the GPU has to handle and make the tablet feel more fluid. But I think on the Max 11's case, since it has more horsepower inside, Amazon should give you the flexibility of choosing, but it is what it is at this moment. The really only difference in advanced settings compared to other Fire tablets is for stylus and handwriting, where you're able to turn on functions like the hover mode, and that means if you are just pointing the kind of stylus here before touching the screen, you still get a little dot as an indication of where the pen is. And for the optional keyboard case, the ability to disable the trackpad as well as arrange some of the different shortcuts, customizing it slightly. Everything else, though, again, is pretty much stock to what we've seen on Fire OS before, but not bad. Under display properties, for instance, you can turn on a blue shade mode just to reduce eye strain if you are reading. But the benefit here is you obviously get a much richer, saturated looking panel with higher contrast, as well as more responsiveness in terms of the refresh compared to a e-ink display. So good for media consumption, some light gaming, as well as watching back videos primarily would be the forte, I would say, on something like this instead. Last but not least, I'll just mention that if you're getting the 64GB version, you'll have around 50GB free when you first take it out of the box, so I would definitely recommend augmenting that with a memory card if you're trying to install more local media files and apps. And of course, Amazon has their versions of all the utility tools as compared to using the default ones from Google. So that's the biggest difference, is an ecosystem. If you are a Amazon member and you're subscribed to services like Prime, you're able to leverage the most out of this. For instance, you get access to, again, Prime Video, watching back their TV shows and content as an alternative to something like Netflix, in addition to, again, some free books, content in the Kindle app, as well as faster same-day to two-day shipping on products you purchase on Amazon, as well as their version of Google Photos, which means you're able to have unlimited backups of your images that you're taking on the tablet onto your personal cloud drive tied to your Amazon account. So it's an alternative ecosystem, really, to the default Google apps or even what Apple provides on an iPad. That being said, if you're not really an active Amazon customer, then it's going to be, of course, a tougher sell. But that's why oftentimes, Amazon are able to price these devices more aggressively at a lower cost, is try to offer it almost as a perk to their current customers that have those memberships active. Anyways, under the utility folder, you'll also find a handful of apps, again, custom designed by Amazon, including their Calculator app, a basic file manager, as well as Audible for audiobooks, since that's also now owned by Amazon as well, so all their services, including what they call the Silk browser, which back in the day when hardware on tablets and phones were still much more limited, one of the perks of Silk is it did a similar trick to Opera Mini back in the kind of Windows Mobile days, in that it actually offloads some of the processing work using their servers, which meant less powerful hardware on the tablet itself was able to load back pages more quickly using what they call their WhisperNet service. So that same policy still applies, but these days you can toggle it on or off under advanced settings, especially since a lot of these devices like the Fire Max 11 here is a lot more powerful. So even without it being activated, you're still able to get a pretty good general web browsing experience. With the 4GB of RAM, I was able to hop back and forth between around a dozen tabs in the browser, and it still felt relatively responsive as I was navigating back and forth. We can also try loading back a page here like The Verge and see how that fares. A more complex site with ads as well as video elements. So that was almost instantaneous, and again, a little bit snappier than you would expect. The Stylus integration, though, I will say, is maybe lacking a few extra perks, similar to the Pixel tablet situation, which is improving. However, compared to, say, Samsung's Galaxy S Pens, they have the ability for you to take screenshots using the stylus and annotate directly on the screenshots. Well, some of those features are still not found on the Fire Max 11, but you can obviously use it as a cursor point, and again, for things like drawing and note-taking that we'll see more later on. Responsiveness seems good, as well as reception quality has been very strong. Even though we're further away from the router at the moment, I was consistently almost full bars, so had no disconnections in my testing. And back on the home page, if we drag down the notification shade, you can also turn on and off wireless options, including the Bluetooth, as well as, again, Alexa that you can trigger on and off for the microphones to be recognizing your voice or not, for doing quick commands like timers, as well as controlling home appliances that you may have tied to the Amazon account. An ultra low power saving mode, screen recording, as well as screen mirroring is also built on in. Or you can swipe left or right to take a look at some recommended content under the For You tab, similar to the kind of Google newsfeed on the left of Android, and also a library tab that will show all of your purchased content, including books, as well as any media files. And again, instead of the Google Play Store by default, of course, Amazon has their own version of the App Store, which, to be fair, has a decent selection of utility as well as mini games that you can find these days, but of course the selection is not going to be quite as wide as the regular Google Play Store. And most notably, the lack of default Google services on board means that you can't use the standard, for example, YouTube app, because it requires the Google framework to function. That being said, there are numerous tutorials, pretty easy steps that you can follow in just a few minutes to kind of sideload the Google apps back onto Fire tablets. So it's not a really complicated process. In fact, I would definitely recommend that if you are picking up a Fire tablet device. It just expands on the utility, but this is what you get when you first take it out of the box. You can also try alternatives like APK Pure if you wanted another alternative app store to quickly download other services, as well as, again, APKs that are perhaps not found directly on the Amazon App Store. With that being said, perhaps the biggest limitation as compared to a stock Android is you get less customization, especially in the way of, say, widgets. You are able to set folders at the very least on the home page, but again, it takes a little bit more effort to customize the look and feel of the device versus stock Android, which is more flexible at the end of the day. Now finally, at the very bottom, you do have one button that you can press on to go into the home dashboard. So this is very similar to on the Google Nest Hub smart displays, and again, the Google Pixel tablet, where you're able to control different appliances, set it up as a digital photo frame with your Amazon photos, turn on and off different lights when you put it into this particular mode, and be able to monitor everything in your house via that quick dashboard key. Now, taking a quick look at the camera, definitely not a ton of settings here, but you are able to turn on grid composition as well as HDR and a night mode. And again, for just simply scanning in text documents, at the very least, it seems to do a fair job with a okay level of detail. But of course, it's not going to beat your phone, but just gets the job done for, again, barcode scanning and just capturing something very quick. In decently lit environments, it does all right for video conferencing, but don't expect, again, the highest res thing in the world. But again, with HDR, and if you have sufficient lighting, it can still look all right. Now, also jumping into a quick demo of what the speakers sound like. So takeaway being that, again, these speakers are actually quite decent for a, again, budget-oriented tablet still at the end of the day, and they are certified with Dolby Atmos when it comes to the surround sound effect, so it's actually not bad, not as thin-sounding as you would think for a relatively lightweight tablet, has a bit of depth to it, and gets plenty loud and, again, immersive for just general consumption of videos on YouTube as well as Netflix. That being said, again, on a tablet, especially an 11-inch unit, I would still really like to see a legacy 3.5mm headphone jack that unfortunately seems to be just a relic of the past. Even on the Google Pixel tablet as well, we saw that. So you have to rely on either Bluetooth wireless headphones or a dongle. The processing package inside also gets by with handling these regular tasks, honestly, without too much issues. It doesn't really thermal throttle, so thankfully the back of the tablet doesn't get too warm either as you're using it. Performance has been pretty consistent, and it's also, again, not too heavy either. Now, taking a closer look at the Stylus experience, and you're able to leverage different drawing apps available in Android, such as Artflow, Sketchbook, as well as Bamboo Paper, being some of my favorites that have that pressure sensitivity out of the box, including Squid, as well as another popular choice. But here in Bamboo Paper, just to serve as an example, if we press lightly versus a harder line, you'll see that differentiation come across as I am drawing and sketching. So it's among the growing slew of more budget-conscious Android tablets that have some type of stylus integration with pressure sensitivity. Also, the hover capabilities means that the palm rejection is thankfully working decently as well. So in my testing, I was able to put my hand on top of it as I'm note-taking without too much accidental touches on the display affecting the performance. So decent enough for handwriting, notes, things like that. It's just Amazon doesn't give you a built-in first-party note-taking app, so you have to rely on some third-party ones to really leverage that. And I think Sketchbook is another one that's going to be great because you have plenty of different pen tip options to play with, and this app is also pretty well integrated, especially with USI kind of support here. Latency is also not too problematic. I mean, sure, it might not be 100% as perfect as an Apple Pencil Pro or something like that, but this is also a pretty big delta when it comes to price difference at the end of the day, and to have this capability and support, again, with decent palm rejection, nice pressure sensitivity, if you're using it for just general note-taking and casual art, I think you'll be more than satisfied. And obviously, the color nature of the display here makes it well suited for purposes like documents like PDFs, textbooks, as well as comic reading, where you're able to scroll back and forth and leverage the more saturated looking colors that are on here compared to an e-ink panel, for example. That being said, for black and white text, if you're primarily looking at just, again, printed books, then perhaps a traditional e-ink panel on a regular Kindle device might still be more beneficial. But this is a slightly more versatile and well-rounded product, I would argue, since you're able to also use it for other purposes, including email, again, sideloading any Android apps onto it and having a little bit more performance inside. So that is more or less it as far as our kind of closer look at the Amazon Fire Max 11. Again, it's the most impressive hardware that we've seen from a Fire tablet to date, and it's actually quite exciting to see because it's still a fairly good value. Again, if you're getting it with the trade-in offers, a lot of times coming in at around $150 to $200. You're getting an all-metal build, definitely faster performance compared to other budget-oriented Fire tablets, as well as USI Stylus support for pressure sensitivity, and an integrated fingerprint scanner that we very rarely see on tablets in this price range. Combined with stereo speakers, as well as, again, an optional keyboard case that you can pick up, I think it's actually a fairly compelling value hardware-wise, especially when you think of it as an alternative to something like the Google Pixel tablet at kind of half the price, if you are an Amazon customer, that is, and you have other products in their ecosystem, from smart home appliances to perhaps Prime, that you can take advantage of more of the kind of free streaming content that comes available with it, then I think you'll get the most out of the unit. When it comes to everyday usage, again, things like web browsing and watching back videos also don't really pose too big of a problem for the processing package inside. Even some casual gaming, as you can tell here, can still be mostly handled. Even heavier titles like PUBG, Asphalt series, Minecraft can be played as well. If you just give it a few extra seconds for things to load, you may not get buttery frame rates 24/7, again, similar to other Helio G99 power tablets that we've seen in the past, but it's still reasonable enough for casual gaming, as long as you have your expectations tempered, that is. Perhaps the only real slight downside would be, again, Fire OS is still definitely not my favorite version of Android. I think the skin is still a little bit too obtrusive when it comes to customization. You aren't able to, again, use gesture nav at all. The fact that there are no widget support, you're just a bit more locked down and restricted from a design perspective. However, again, if you are a Amazon customer, this is definitely still not a bad choice, I would say, and at least shows a little bit more ambition from Amazon's part. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.